Welcome into the Dog Dispatch live on a Friday afternoon. I am John Smith, your host. We're calling this our Dog Dispatch Happy Hour. Coach and I
Yes.
have gone live here the last couple of weeks instead of pre-recording like we normally do on Fridays. So excited to be joining you again today, this week. We have a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about UGA newcomers who we think will flash in 2024. We are going to talk about Earnest Greene and do a first and fundamental breakdown. It is National Bourbon Day, so we're going to talk a little
Yes.
bit of bourbon talk. I mean, all kinds of
hmm
stuff, Coach.
Good
How you
stuff.
feeling? How you feeling on this Friday?
Well, cheers to you, my friend. I've got my bourbon poured for today, and I can't tell you enough the thanks for this coming up weekend for all you fathers out there. Happy Father's Day to you, John. I hope you have a great day on Sunday. And I have to give you a shout out, brother. I know you probably don't want to do this, but man, I woke up on, I'm sitting here Thursday morning, just getting up my normal day because as being a school teacher, I'm obviously enjoying the summer month, and I get up and lo and behold, it's like check your front door. It's like the tooth fairy showed up. But man, I'm telling you what, I am not deserving of this, but I just want to tell you thank you from the bottom of my heart for thinking about me. This is something I will cherish and definitely look forward to drinking later on. So thank you kindly, my friend. I do appreciate that.
Well, happy Father's Day to you. I hope you
Mhm.
enjoy it as well. Always nice to give the gift of bourbon. I try
Oh
to do that
yes.
when I can. I
Yes.
can't do it as often as I want, but
Mhm.
I always like to do it when I can.
Well, it was
Um,
definitely well received. I appreciate it.
awesome, Coach. What's in your glass on this Friday?
Oh, I made myself an old fashioned. It's just
All right.
the couple of bitters, a little cherry, a little about two solid little pours of the bourbon, so a little double, and definitely feeling pretty good today. How about
Awesome.
yourself?
I'm drinking Old Ezra 7. This is it's a high proof bourbon, and so I apologize for the little slow start here. It gave me the Kentucky hug pretty quickly. So,
Hmm.
um, all right,
Nice.
let's get right into ball. That's what people are here to hear about. They're not
Yes,
here to
they
hear
are.
about bourbon. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but that's
Hmm.
not why people come. People are here to hear about ball. Coach, I want to start with flag or flex,
Hmm.
and I got to get your opinion on a flag or flex. A big one this week. Brent Key. So Brent Key was doing some press conferences and some interviews this week, and he said a couple things about Georgia when asked about the Georgia rivalry.
Hmm.
He said a couple things I thought were interesting. Number one, he said that there is nothing I hate more in the world than Georgia, than the University of Georgia. It's probably the only thing I actually hate, which is
Hmm.
some strong words.
Hmm.
Brent Key, he also, I think he said a couple of other things that I'll have to get the quotes. Hang on, I apologize. I had them and then I lost them. But he said there's nothing I hate more in the world. It's probably the only thing I hate. When I say hate, like I truly despise everything about it, about Georgia football. I really do. That was Brent Key this week. Coach, clean old fashioned hate hasn't been much of a rivalry. Georgia Tech
Oh.
played a close game last year, but they haven't won one in a long time. Do you think Brent Key coming out and saying that he truly hates Georgia is a flag or a flex?
Um, as of right now, it's a flag. It would be a flex if he had probably seen more consistency out of them over the last few years, but he definitely gives bulletin board material to Coach Smart and staff, as well as those players who have lined it up between the lines against Georgia Tech. I do think Georgia Tech's heading in the right direction, and I'm going to say this because I think a lot of people say, well, last year you didn't have Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey
Mm-hmm.
really was limited, those kinds of things. We would have drug them if we'd have played. We played a very vanilla game, but you can't really leave it to just that because I've watched that game breaking down certain players and I watched the line of scrimmage and I watched how they competed against us. You bring in Buster Faulkner, who I think is a good offensive mind. He's got a
Mm-hmm.
good running quarterback in Haynes King. I think he's beginning to see, if anything, he's going to make his players. He has to be sort of that head moniker for his program so that his kids believe in the fact that you may go 5-7 in the ACC or 5-6 in the ACC or whatever the totality they have to go against in the ACC,
Mm-hmm.
but we want to beat Georgia. And so, honestly, to tell you the truth, I think he's going to try to start bringing that level of competition that will start making this a game, hopefully, at the end of the year. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have necessarily the recruits to back those statements up right now. But you definitely can see that he has added bulletin board material for Georgia this coming year.
Yeah, you're the one. I'll let you decide if it's a flag or a flex. I will say, Brent Key, he was on staff under Nick Saban at Alabama. He's seen programs operate at a high level. He's a really good football coach. He's a football guy. He's a hard-nosed guy. Georgia Tech graduate coaching for his alumni.
Yep.
I have absolutely no problem with what Brent Key said. None at all. I think that's him being a head coach, and obviously he's got to back it up. What I will say, and I'm going to say this to Georgia fans, and y'all might be a little mad at me. Maybe it's the bourbon talking.
Nothing wrong with that.
I do think that Georgia Tech's going to be more competitive than they've been in years past. Now, whether that's more competitive with Georgia, I don't know. But I think Brent Key, he has a really good football staff. As seen by, he hired a guy, and then Kirby Smart went and stole one of his coaches. That tells you the caliber of guys that he hires. Number two, I think he also I think he knows what's important to his fan base and to his team and to his program. And I think he's saying all the right things, absolutely saying all the right things. And people will say, you said it, you said bulletin board material. Listen, if that's what you have to use to get your program out of the gutter. I mean, this is a team, a team that's been beat up on by Georgia, that's been little brother to Georgia. And so I think Brent Key, kudos to Brent Key actually for coming out and saying what he said. Because I think at the end of the day, there's only two things that can happen. One, you can be respectful and you can do all those things in public and you can come out and get beat. Or you can have a little bit of an edge about you, and you can hopefully maybe squeeze something out of your program and come out and be competitive. And so I kudos to him for that.
Right. There's relevance to that, too. He's trying to make that team relevant again, and you said it very well, and that's the reason why I kind of staple it at the end. It's relevancy. He's trying to make his team relevant again when it comes to playing the Georgia Bulldogs in the late fall.
Yeah, agree. All right, Coach, we're going to move on to our next segment. We're going to talk a little bit about newcomers on Georgia's offense, defense, special teams for 2024. Some of the recruits who just showed up as early enrollees, or maybe some that just showed up in the summer. I mean, you can pick. Coach, who do you think from the newcomers for Georgia, from specifically from the 2024 recruiting class, who are some folks to keep an eye on? Some folks that we think might flash, that could see the field first, that could get some opportunities this year as a true freshman on the Georgia football team?
I'm going to look at those three position areas: offense, defense, special teams. And typically, if there's one specific position group that gets an opportunity to see a young kid get in, it's on the offensive line. And I think Daniel Calhoun is going to be a mid-year that's already got a chance to see, based off what I saw in the G-Day game. And, they a lot of those mid-year linemen got a chance to play. They were in the second line of trenches there. Malachi Tolliver I saw in there. Uni was in there. Another guy that people don't know about, the kid that we got up from the Jersey area, is Marcus Harrison. He's a guy I broke down way back almost a year ago now, and he came in at the normal summertime like Nate Frazier did. And I think he's another one that honestly we could be talking about as well. But if you look at it from an offensive standpoint, I think offensive linemen are the ones that tend to get those first good kicks. And so Daniel Calhoun might be the first one we see there. On defense, I'm going to go to the secondary. And from what I've heard, there's a lot of high talk right now about KJ Bolden. And if he's at the safety position, I think that's a little bit easier than being on Gilligan's Island as a corner, because you get put, like I said, as many times, trial by fire at defensive back. But as a safety, you get a chance in zone to bracket with corners. So you're 2-on-1 a lot of the times. You're coming downhill to fit and run support, which he does a good job of. He showed some bright spots of that in the G-Day game. So, a lot of people are going to say, well, what about Ellis Robinson? But Ellis Robinson being on an island is something a little bit different. It's a little bit of a different beast than what KJ Bolden can do, bracketing and running a lot of the two-man stuff that we like to do from the the safety position. So I think he's someone we're going to see sooner rather than later on defense. And then when it comes to special teams, you're looking at someone that's a speedster, someone that can take off running, that can just make you go, wow, there's some kind of it factor there. And I think Dwight Phillips Jr., the kid that came in that we signed as a running back in this class with Chauncey and Nate, and he is a speedster. And someone we didn't get a chance to see, obviously, in the spring due to the fact that he came in at the normal time like everybody else did in the summer. And he may be one of those that we see on kickoff return, possibly a punt returner. Definitely going to see him on kickoff and punt team for his speed, maybe being like a gunner. But I could see him being on special teams and providing some depth early from a speed perspective in the return game for Georgia this coming year.
Yeah, I think those are all really, really good picks. Hard to argue with anything that you said there. I think the one that I'm most excited about of the folks that you listed is certainly Dwight Phillips Jr. to me. I think that kid is just electric, and so I'm really interested to see what he does at Georgia. All right, I'm going to give you my picks for offense. So for the newcomers that I think that are going to give an opportunity this year, I think there are two that I keep going back and forth with. The first one I think is Jaden Reddle. I think the tight end.
Yes.
Coming into Georgia, that's a room where Georgia went into the transfer portal to try to get some depth, right? You got Oscar Delp, you got Lawson Lucky, you got Ben Urasek.
Yeah.
But when you look, I mean, there's not a ton of depth at that position, and this is a kid who is just, I think, has a very, very high ceiling. Just if you've seen pictures of Jaden Reddle, if you haven't, go look up some pictures of Jaden Reddle. I mean, just
beast.
He's 6'4". Yeah, he's 6'4". He's about 250. Just a really mountain of a guy, and I think he's going to get some opportunity at the tight end position by the time this year is said and done. I also think Sokovie White is one that I would keep an eye on. Sokovie White, kid who flashed in the G-Day game, wide receiver. I think he's one that will certainly on the offensive side of the ball has the best opportunity to see the field first. And especially in some of those packages that Mike Bobo is going to want to run, where you get some, try to get some mismatches from a skill perspective. So those are two on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm really interested to see. I'm going to go with two, even though I can give you my one, but I think Justin Williams and Chris Cole, either one. I think those two stud linebackers. That Georgia brought in are two that I'm going to keep an eye on. Again, that's probably the deepest room on the Georgia football team. But what I do think that Kirby, if there's one thing that we saw last year, is depth is so important at that position. And so I do think when he gets an opportunity to play some of those young guys at linebacker, he's going to play some of those young guys at linebacker, and those are two I'll keep an eye on. And then special teams, special teams. I wanted to go with Dwight Phillips on special teams, but you stole it, so I'm going to give
Gotcha.
give you someone that you didn't list. I'm going to go with Nitro Tuggle. I think Nitro Tuggle is a kid who's going to have a real opportunity. Kirby, he puts elite skill players and really talented skill players on special teams very often. And I think Nitro Tuggle is going to be a guy who's going to have some opportunity on special teams before it's all said and done.
Yes, I agree too. That's a good pick, no doubt.
Awesome. All right. Those are our picks for newcomers who we think will flash. If you're in the chat or if you're watching this later on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know who you think might have some opportunity to get some run on this Georgia football team by the time the season's said and done from these freshmen coming in. All right, we're gonna move on to our first and fundamental segment. So we do it every week. Coach gets an opportunity to break down a player that he's excited about and tell you a little bit about what he's seeing. And this is first and fundamental. All right, Coach, we got a good one today. One of my favorite players returning for Georgia. This is Earnest Greene. Coach, tell the people what you're seeing from Earnest Greene, and we'll watch a little film too.
Honestly, Earnest Greene EG3 is the way I'm going to refer to him as. He's really kind of just been that guy that's just sort of steadily done his job. I've been so impressed with just his consistency coming in as a redshirt freshman this year and really doing a great job for the Bulldogs. So let's go ahead and hit the tape here and let's get into it a little bit. You know, in his redshirt sophomore year, he will make his second tour on the Georgia offensive line this year at left tackle. His consistency and understanding of pass pro stunts, along with his ability to move people in the trenches, has given him this opportunity. Even in high school, you can see with pass pro, he was a little high, and I think he carries that over to his first year to UGA. But I noticed that he moves people very well, is very aggressive, and works on great leverage. Watching Earnest Greene on film, the first thing that jumps out at me is his athleticism. His 6'4", 320-pound frame moves very well in space. He's being coached very well with his ability to get out in space and deliver kill shots on fast and tunnel and jailbreak screens. He's very explosive in his hips, and he gets out of his stance very well when he's ready to strike. Most defenders make business decisions to get out of his way instead of taking him on, which to me is just typically as good of a block if they get out of the way. I do know this. He does need to learn to stay under control as he sets himself up for kill shots on the kick out block. He does it a lot of times where he'll get out in space and he doesn't break down very well, but he'll have much better success in the screen game if he can do that. He needs to work on position maintenance and impact, and he will have many more hits like the defender that he sends to an early grave against the University of Florida. I absolutely love watching this play over and over and over again. Just bam right there. God love that. His limitations I saw from a pass rush perspective was that he tended to come out of his stance high and that it hurt him when he took on straight bull rushes into the V of the neck. Earlier in the year, he struggled in communication with Truss, who was at guard, allowing the inside leverage to defenders. That quickly got fixed when they moved Dylan Fairchild over to his wingman at guard. That is going to be a great growth year, having him by his side again. In run game concepts, adequately, he grew as his backside cutoffs were good, and he worked on an area of improvement that I like, which was finishing plays to the whistle. He had some times where he would hit and not continue and finish. He improved on the gap scheme as the year went on, but he wasn't called on that very much, honestly. He needs to learn to carry that same velocity out of his steps on gap scheme plays where he is the wrapper to the play side. It's the same way he gets out on screen and sweep game. He learned as the year went on to not be a one-hit wonder, and he learned to finish to the whistle, which was important because you don't want to have your QB1 going down because of a misfit. When you see that his kick slide got much improved as he saw the speed of the game improved, that is an important technique to get to certain levels against elite rush talent. The only type of rush that seemed to give him a heart problem during the season was the straight up bull rush. He learned to work on getting lower as the year went on, and that paid dividends for Carson Beck throwing in the pocket. In the SEC championship game, Dallas Turner only got to the quarterback once on his watch, and it was on a straight bull rush. Bull rush. He has a jackhammer for a left and a right arm. If he didn't do it once, he did it 1,000 times, where DEs and LBs could not speed rush him off the edge. He would run them out every time. His pass pro skill sets were second to none. Early on, somewhat hesitant in the zone game. I would like to see him explode off the ball a little bit better to get better leverage side. He is always using fundamentals to outwork his defenders. His combo blocking was definitely not a problem with him in the base or the down position. And honestly, even though if you look at this very last clip that I have here against Florida State, that even though Cedric Van Pran Granger makes this block, I feel that EG3 would have done the same thing to this guy as they flathead and destroy that cornerback for the score. So this is a great year. Looking forward to many more highlights of this young man. He is definitely going to be on the radar for all SEC first team as we get through his redshirt sophomore year. So a lot of great things from Earnest Greene III as we go into this season.
Yeah, Earnest Greene, his ceiling is so high.
Yes.
I mean, I think he has as high of a ceiling as anybody has had coming in and playing this offensive tackle position at Georgia. Coach, as you were breaking down Earnest Greene, like, I don't love doing comps. Y'all know this if you watch the show. It's not really my favorite thing to do. But who are some comps, as you think about, some of the past Georgia elite tackles? Who are some of the guys that come to mind if you have any with Earnest Greene?
Earnest Greene III reminds me because of his ability. You can tell that he was coached very well in high school. And of course, I guess Earls too, is how he gets out of his stance and gets out on screen game. And that is very reminiscent of It's funny you asked that because I could have told you 100 times. The kid that went to Pittsburgh.
Broderick Jones.
Yeah,
Broderick
Broderick
Jones.
Jones.
That
Yes.
was mine too.
Oh, was that yours too?
Yep. Yeah, go for it.
Honestly,
Go for it.
yeah, I just because of the way he moves in space, because that's something about a tackle a lot of people don't think. They just think it's the grudge of laying on people that's on top of you at the 4-I-4 or the 5 technique. But you got to wrap to play side backers on gap scheme. You got to double team and block down to the backside backer when gap scheme is coming to your side. You got to be able to skip pull and get outside and block really good skill position players that are very fast in space. And that's very tough to do. So, just to have the athleticism for him to be in the trenches and to take on what he has to take on pound for pound leverage wise. And he's going to learn to get lower and sink those hips and get stronger in his lower body to take a lot of that poundage on. But as far as getting out into space and doing things that he does, oh my God, he makes that just look very easy. He looks very natural at it. And that would be my comp, would be the Jones kid that went to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I like Broderick Jones as a comp for him. I also think, and again, it's not a direct comp. I don't know that Earnest Greene will be, maybe he will be as good as an Andrew Thomas. I think his footwork definitely is reminiscent of Andrew Thomas in some of his early years at Georgia, and his ability to just really bring his, it's people don't understand if you've never been a big person, or you've never been around big people, to understand what it takes to be able to move that fast with that much balance, with that much control, with your feet, underneath you and changing directions and all of those things. I mean, when you're 6'5", 340, 350 pounds, I mean, it's very difficult. And so, so I think Earnest Greene, just that pure athleticism. There's a lot of Georgia greats. Broderick Jones probably the closest comp, but Andrew Thomas, I think is right up there on the list as well.
Yeah. I actually had the honor to coach with a guy named Barry Hall. He's a Gordon County native, played at Gordon Central, played at Middle Tennessee State, went on to play with the Titans in the league. And he was an offensive line coach with me for probably half of my years coaching. And I remember when he would talk to me about O-line techniques, and I would watch his kick slide, and I would watch him back up and how he would have to take on an edge speed rush and how he would have to get there. I mean, he's 6'6", 340 doing this. And I'm watching him. He looks like a ballerina, man. And to be able to have that kind of leverage, I really have a lot of respect for those big kids, like you said, that can move in space and show that agility.
Yeah, and the other thing that you have too is Earnest Greene. I mean, he's coming back. He had almost 900 snaps last year, and so his ability to come back and bring in that experience at Georgia.
Yes.
And when you have, listen, PFF grades are not the end all be all. We know that. But when you have 900 snaps and you have a PFF grade of 70, it's really says a lot about just, again, your ability to do what Earnest Greene does consistently, which is the hard part. The hard part is just doing it over and over and over. And to have that many snaps and be as consistent as he is, I'm really excited about this kid for sure.
One last thing to add, a lot of people don't realize this too. This is one of those sort of mystery elements, but who you have beside you shoulder to shoulder at guard is a huge factor. And him having Dylan Fairchild back as his wingman, there's a lot of things you have to communicate in pass pro and run sets. And that's very important to have someone who has a lot of snaps and looking to be top honors as well this year at guard.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that's our first and fundamental segment. We do it every week. Thanks, Coach, for taking the time to break those down. If you're just tuning in, like, subscribe. We appreciate you being here. Jump in the chat. Leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you on the show. Coach, tell us a little bit. Now, we didn't. When we talked about our show prep, what we're going to talk about, I didn't put this on the list, so I'll own it. I'm going to give you a curveball. Tell me a little bit about when you think about Carson Beck, right? So the Carson Beck machine. We talked about our top quarterbacks last show. The top quarterback rankings are coming out. The preseason accolades, all those things. When you think about Carson Beck, what do you think from your perspective is The one thing that's missing from Carson Beck right now that will move him into the elite of the elite conversation, um, as not just a Georgia quarterback, but a college football quarterback, an NFL prospect. Some guy,
Mm-hmm.
one of the NFL draft analysts said Carson Beck has a chance to go #1 overall in the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
What does Carson Beck have to do? What does he have to figure out to put himself in that stratosphere?
I'll say two things. One's mental, one's physical. One's actually a technique, one's actually from a mental perspective. And I actually did a breakdown on this on my side at Coach Hayes Huddle, where I talked about the fact that I think Carson Beck needs to quit thinking. He needs to just let the ball rip from a psychological standpoint. I did a breakdown in the Ohio State game, Peach Bowl, where Stetson Bennett already knew where he was going to go with the ball. And realistically, if you look at it right before he releases the football, it looks like Arian Smith's double covered, but he throws it where they're not. And he makes a throw that I don't think Carson Beck makes at that time. Carson Beck was worried about making mistakes. He needs to let the ball fly. The only thing that I would say, probably from a technicality standpoint, is he just needs to work on his balance in the pocket from 3-step, 5-step game. I wish they would roll him out more. We don't see that very often. I did a breakdown on the Florida State game where they did it on the goal line. Man, they got in trips, went motion, rolled him out, and they just ran the little rub play and threw it to Dominic Lovett for a touchdown that got across the plain goal line. But honestly, just getting better balance in the pocket so that he can make those longer vertical throws. I think a lot of people tend to want to put him on the stand for, not making those vertical throws that leaves the receivers on. But if there's one thing technical wise, I would say just his balance in the pocket on his 3-5-step game and throwing those vertical balls, letting them go, and being able to read pre-snap and say, you know what, it may not look like the perfect play, but I'm just going to let it rip and give it a chance and throw it to where my receiver can make the play and not worry about the interceptions. If he does that, I think we're going to just see something completely different from him this year in that perspective.
Yeah, the mental game is definitely high on the list for me. One of the things that I saw from Carson Beck last year that I never thought I would say this about a quarterback, especially at Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was making reads too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially early in the season, you saw him hitting a lot of outlet guys. You saw him hitting a lot of checkdowns. I think that timing. I think that Georgia, Mike Bobo, they've worked with Carson Beck so much on quickly getting through your progressions that I think that he certainly was getting through them too quick. Some folks in the chat mentioned the deep ball. You mentioned the deep ball. I think a lot of that is mental too. I think a lot of that is just, when you see a guy running wide open, and when you see a guy, a read that is there and it's the home run ball. I think a lot of that was mental as well from a first year starter in Carson Beck. I do think the deep ball. I think the deep ball will get better this year. I think the biggest thing is, and I've said it before. I've said it earlier a couple times on the show already. Kirby Smart even said it. I think it's just his leadership for me. I think it's that ability to, he's a very unassuming guy as a person, right? He's a little bit quiet, a little bit introverted. Nothing wrong with that. But I think he has to grab control of this team, grab control of this offense, grab control of his position, not just as the Georgia quarterback, but his position as one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and just grab the bull by the horns, man. And I think he certainly can do that. He has the ability to do that, and I'm excited to see him come along there. And and Sacred Grove said in the chat, he said he got excited seeing a wide open streaker, and boy, we've all been excited seeing a wide open streaker. Some of us in the Carson Beck context, some of us in other contexts. So, but no, that was a joke. That was a joke, y'all, on Friday. Embrace his position. You're the man. It's your show. It was your show last year, but we saw it in the SEC championship game. That body language. When you get behind, man, you really have to bow your chest and just say, yeah, not on my watch. That's what Stetson Bennett did, and that's what separates, I think, these guys who Carson Beck. I'll say this: Carson Beck's tool set as a quarterback, especially as an NFL prospect, is way higher than Stetson Bennett. Way higher. Stetson Bennett just had that it factor. He just had that leadership. He had that, no one's gonna break me, and that included the Georgia coaches. And I think that's what Carson's got to figure out for himself. Yep.
Yes, I agree. No doubt.
And and our buddy Hyde in the chat said if Carson gets the deep ball dialed in, it's game over. Man, the college football better hope that Carson Beck does not get that deep ball dialed in early. Because I mean, it's not only game over. If he gets that deep ball dialed in, it might be Heisman time for Carson Beck. Because I do think Georgia has the skill players to absolutely take the top off of it. And Carson's just got to find the ability to hit him for sure.
Yeah, one thing too you add to that is it's got to be when you look at vertical passing game, when it's 4 receiver sets, possibly the 5th in the transition from the running back position, it's got to be out of play action, which obviously gets people sucked downhill so that you can get the vertical, or it's pre-snap read green because of what the coverage is in. Because a lot of times those 50-50 balls we like to see, and we like to see them come down with them with the back shoulder throws. But I'm talking about those plays like we saw last year after the Tennessee sudden change, and we turn around and run play action off it, and Ladd puts a move that kid's still trying to find his ankles, and he throws the ball in the touch, for the touchdown right after that. I'm talking about those kind of vertical plays that you want to see out of our offense this year. And I agree with you 100%, and with what Hyde said in the chat, that if he gets that vertical game dialed in, we are definitely going to see a different level of Carson Beck this year.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it. Stetson Bennett. He's in 2021 at Auburn. Was when he really started figuring that out. When Ladd McConkey, that was another Ladd McConkey situation where earlier in the game he had Stetson Bennett had underthrown a ball. Ladd, had that safety beat by a step later in the game to start the second half, and
he just let it rip.
Hit him in stride, man, and it was absolutely game over. And when you have the ability to do that at any moment, that defense, it's going to stress them the heck out for sure.
Yes, exactly.
All right. All right, Coach. We're going to take a little bit of a left turn because I did want to touch on something that came out in the AJC today. Scott Cochran. So for those of you who have followed the program, Scott Cochran joined Georgia football in 2020. He came over as a special teams coordinator and on-field coach. In 2021, he took a leave of absence from Georgia and ended up not ever coming back to be an on-field coach at UGA. He was still around the program for a couple of years. He's now left the program. And an article came out in the AJC really explaining kind of what Scott Cochran went through. And I want to touch on it for 2 reasons. Number one, to bring awareness to Scott Cochran's, kind of situation and give him some major kudos for what he's gone through and where he is. And number 2, I just think it's important. I think it's important sometimes when you have these situations as coaches who all of a sudden have the courage to step up and say, hey, this is where I was, this is what happened. I think maybe it can help other people that are in similar situations. So Scott Cochran, he came out and said that he was addicted to painkillers. And the article in the AJC, it opens up with just, a gut-wrenching line. He says, one day in April 2020, his wife Sissy found him lying unconscious, and he says, she found me dead. That's what Scott Cochran said. And he had lived, he had this addiction for a while. COVID in 2020 had kind of left him isolated around, some of his, away from, his football coach family, his football program family. And he ended up getting addicted to painkillers. In 2021, he called Kirby Smart and said, hey, I'm a drug addict. Said he called Kirby Smart crying. And what I love is that Kirby Smart, he said in that conversation, all that Kirby Smart did was ask him how his family is, tell him what he should do in terms of getting help, tell him that, that he can take the time that he needs to figure this out. Kirby Smart went and visited him in the rehab facility. It definitely, seems like the Kirby Smart was clearly being the friend that Scott Cochran needed in that moment. And so, Scott Cochran he's formed an organization to help folks with addiction and recovery. It's called the American Addiction Recovery Association. and he, alongside this guy named Jeff Breedlove, are going to advocate for better addiction recovery programs. So I thought that was just a really, kind of just a really, story that has a good ending. Not all these stories have good endings when it comes to addiction, things like that. But also wanted to highlight, just Kirby Smart and his approach. And for those of you who watched, Kirby deal with that in press conferences and how he went through that, just, fantastic again as a leader of a football team.
Yeah, it's kind of sobering and it's humbling because when you have something like this, the first thing you want to see is advocacy for that, whether it be at the national level like Scott's doing now, and also from your peer base, because that's a huge part to this. It's not just about the recovery from it. It's about the rebuilding of relationships. It's about the understanding of how you're going to rebuild based off what you have done. And that's so tough because I have personal situations that I have noticed, over my lifetime on a personal level, where I see that, the healing process from it is so critical once you realize that you have to actually step outside the bubble and admit to yourself that you have a problem. I am not to be the first to judge at all, because I really do think that it's something that's very important that your peers see it from a professional standpoint. It's very similar to how Los Angeles Rams head coach, handled Stetson
Sean
Bennett.
McVay. Yep.
Yeah, Sean McVay handled Stetson Bennett's situation. You've got to have people in those regards that are going to take what you're doing in a very high respect, and all of a sudden, football becomes kind of secondary to what you're dealing with in those situations. When I was at North Murray, we went and did a coaches clinic. Billy Napier was a wide receiver coach. Lane Kiffin was the OC. We went to Alabama just for a football clinic. And I remember going into Scott Cochran's room, and all the coaches were doing their own little spiel. And I remember talking to him, man, and he was so passionate about what he did and so entertaining and just a gruff voice, and everything. But I know the toll that puts on you from a mental standpoint when it comes to coaching at the rigor level that Coach Saban demanded. And then, of course, his connections with Kirby coming to Georgia. So, I'm glad to know that he is in the process of recovery and that hopefully he is healing in the correct fashion. But for advocacy and for healing and for the rebuilding, I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah. And Sacred Grove made a good point in the chat. He said, we take for granted how coaches deal with off the field issues.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Scott Cochran because of Kirby Smart's leadership, and shout out to Scott Cochran for being sober for almost 3 years now. But it's such a great point. I mean, leading a big time football program, we as fans and folks who follow the sport closely, we like X's and O's. We like recruiting. We like winning. We like scheming, the chess match. We like the game day experience and the game day environment. But so many of these head coaches at all levels, I mean, all the way like high school, all the way up through NFL, you mentioned Sean McVay, are dealing with off the field issues where, people are struggling, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's arrests. Kirby Smart's been dealing with a lot of those types of situations, and other programs have too. And I think what it takes to sit in that chair, I think we often take for granted, it's very easy to say, yep, that guy messed up, cut that guy loose. It's very easy to say, hey, that kid, that kid shouldn't be on the team anymore.
Yeah.
It's very easy to say, like, hey, yeah, that person should never step foot inside the building anymore because of XYZ. When sometimes what these kids, what these coaches, what these adult staffers, what these people need is a leader and a friend who will actually walk beside them, who will help them navigate the situation and create space for them to actually deal with it in a way that is, they're still employed, they're still on the team, they're still around the program, whatever. But this it's not public, right? Like kicking someone off the team, firing someone, pushing them out of your program is as public as it gets. And so the ability for Kirby Smart and other coaches who have been really good about this, I'll give Nick Saban some kudos around this. He said there was an Alabama player who got a DUI quite a few years ago, and Nick Saban got up and made one of his famous rants where he said, is he better out there or is he better in here? Is he better? Like, y'all want us to just kick him out, leave him to his own device, leave him to the streets, or is he better here with us, like trying to help him, figure out what he's going through. And so, shout out to Kirby Smart for doing that with Scott Cochran, for giving giving him 2 years to have the space to work it out. And so, it really, I think it's just such an underrated, understated part of being a leader. And damn, you got a good one at Georgia, man. You got a good one doing it for the Dogs. So
Yeah, it's good to see, because of all the different testimonial situations that I've dealt with as a coach over the years, seeing these kids, your peers, your friends, your colleagues going through certain situations. God, all these guys that are married, you don't realize the marital strain that gets put on you as well. I mean, Kirby's mentioned that as many times as anything. I'm very much with you on that, 100%, John, of how Kirby handled it. I mean, you wouldn't want a better head coach in that situation to handle that, and that's something that's definitely respected on my side.
Yeah, and who knows if he handled it differently? Who knows where Scott Cochran is? But this is a guy who's now
Exactly.
sober and with his family, and so good stuff.
Yes,
and
sir.
Sacred Grove's put the bow on it here in the chat, where he said parents feel good leaving their sons under Kirby's leadership, and that's it, right? That's it. You got to feel good when you read stuff like this, when you see stuff like this about a coach who will. Who's going to do what it takes to try to create an environment for kids to work through real challenges that you have as an 18 to 22-year-old, or even, as we saw with Scott Cochran, an adult. So
yes,
shout out to Kirby. All right, Coach.
Yes, sir.
We're going to have a little bit of fun here for the last few minutes of the show. It is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day, all the dads out there, dads who are listening to this later via podcast. Happy Father's Day. We salute you.
Yes.
Your job is not easy and often underappreciated. My favorite thing that I heard this week was a guy who said that being a dad is like being an offensive lineman. He said
I saw that.
He said that. Yeah. He said that. I was trying to find the quote here. Sorry, I'm not prepared today. I should have had it pulled up. But he said, dads are the offensive linemen of life. You only notice what we do when we aren't doing it or aren't doing it correctly. And when we miss an assignment, somebody
gets hurt.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so good times. But happy Father's Day, Coach. Tell me a little bit. So you have kids? You had kids who've played sports. You've obviously been around sports. What's your favorite memory as a sports dad?
As a sports dad, it's really unique, because you would think that I would have children who are all in the game, but only one of them was an athlete. The other two were in theater, heavily acclaimed in the theater. I've got 7 state championships between the 3, but there was definitely a game where we played my son's junior year, his state championship. They won his junior year, and believe it or not, it was really not anything he did defensively or offensively. It was really a struggle between both teams, between them and Peach County. But he was the punter for the team too. He had to punt 14 times in that game. So that shows you on both sides of the ball. I think they won 13-7 was the final score, but he punted the ball 14 times. And I don't think I could have ever been more proud of my son punting. He absolutely punted the piss out of the football the entire game, changed the field every time. He had 2 or 3 that were booming, and just got a chance to, just see him have some influence in the game when you have a game that wasn't a high scoring ball game, nor was it really a defensive like output as well. It was just really clean between both teams. So to be able to get down on the field and to live through your child experience a state championship and the magnitude at the Georgia Dome, that was the day that it snowed, and we got snowed in there. We had to travel back home in about 5-6 inches of snow on the ground, but it was well worth the drive, well worth the opportunity to be able to see. It's always nice to see your children thrive. And in that case scenario, that was definitely a thriving moment to embrace your son after a state championship ball game.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have 2 daughters. My oldest daughter played soccer when she was younger, and she, so she's a pretty introverted kid. She definitely has leans more on the introverted side, and she went almost an entire season without scoring a goal. And it was, we thought it was her first year playing, or she had played, like the little leagues, but it was her first year playing with like real competition. And
right.
And most of the kids on her team had scored a goal, because that's kind of how it works in soccer. And I thought thought for sure, we were like, every game we were on pins and needles. She's never going to score. You know, she's going to go a whole season, never score, never play the sport again. Coach, one game, the light bulb just came on. She's a she's a very athletic kid, very gifted. One game, this light bulb came on, and she went ham, like she went off, and
Awesome.
she scored 7 goals on these kids, these little kids, where it wasn't like a imbalance in competition. It just literally, she just figured it out about 7 games into the season, and she literally scored 7 goals, and I thought I was going to get kicked out of the field, you know, because I'm a pretty quiet person, you know. Golf clapping over there. No, I went crazy. I thought it was the best game ever. And she just those poor kids crying, man. I love it to this day. She's making other kids cry, especially because she ended up now she's a high schooler. She doesn't play sports anymore. She plays violin and piano and does all that stuff. She's more into music than she is into sports. But man, that was a great moment for me.
Awesome to hear.
All right, Coach. I'm gonna give another shout out. So our guy Chad Dog 77 in the chat. Chad just announced to the group that he got his biopsy back and there is no cancer. Chad, we love
blessings,
that.
my guy.
Love that for you. Love that for you. Congratulations, my friend. Amazing news. So glad to hear it, and appreciate you being part of the community. Appreciate you watching, and so good to hear
sir.
that.
Yes.
All right. Last thing for today, Coach. Today is National Bourbon Day. National Bourbon Day. You could have fooled me. I feel like every Friday is National Bourbon Day. For me, especially
top myself off here.
Exactly, especially Friday afternoon. Tell me, Coach, what are you planning to get into this weekend for Father's Day? What are you going to be pouring in the glass?
Well, as I prepare for the weekend, typically Father's Day weekend is always the U.S. Open. I was a big golfer growing up and loved the game. Don't get to play as much anymore, but there's something about watching the U.S. Open on the weekend of Father's Day. I go back to Payne Stewart and his, storyline of what he told Phil Mickelson when he beat him on the last hole that year, back in, seems forever ago now, 2000, 2001, I can't recall, but just great memories of knowing that Father's Day and what it means. I think that, like you said, sometimes it goes without notice, but it's really great to know that you've got people around you that support you, that care for you. And more than likely, what I'll be experiencing, I'm definitely going to pop the top on this bad boy. Perfect. I am definitely going to look at, I might just drink it neat, my friend. I don't even know if I'll mix it with anything just to get the first sweet taste from that nectar. So I appreciate, again, you doing that for me. I haven't had that before, so I'm going to look forward to popping the top on that and having me a nice shot of that, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, Coach, please don't mix anything in that Weller.
I'm not.
I'm a bourbon purist. Not a purist. I put, I'll pour over an ice cube. I'll do old fashions and stuff, but you should experience that without it. Awesome. Listen, and also for those of you who partake in the bourbons and whiskeys, not everybody does, and that's fine. But if you do, bottles are made to be open. Don't let your bottles sit around unopened, collecting dust. Enjoy a good bourbon. Enjoy a good whiskey if you have one. And I'm going to give a shout out again, all the dads out there. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. All the moms and the women out there. Thanks for putting up with these burly dumbasses that show up kicking around the house every day trying to cause some chaos and destruction. We salute you as well. And I hope y'all have a great weekend. We will be back next time on the Dog Dispatch. Thank you so much, and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.